are so fortunate today to have Aubrey Bach with us. She's from PayScale.com, and she's going to talk with us about how to negotiate that salary, right? Who's nervous about that? Yeah, okay. We all are, even at my age. So she oversees production of content about salary, higher education, and career strategy, and she's a recovering Diet Coke addict. Oh. She grew up on the mean streets of Orange County, California. But since coming to Seattle in 2007, she's embraced everything the city has to offer except what? The rain.
Of course.
Without further ado, Aubrey, thank you.
Thank you so much. So one of the reasons that, because a lot of you, especially if you're still in school, you may be kind of thinking like, hey, I don't actually have a job yet, so I have no salary to negotiate. We're not talking to you too early. You want to start thinking and talking about salary negotiations as early as possible, because early salary negotiations are crucial. And the reason why is because we've done a ton of research, obviously. We have found that most salaries stagnate around age 40, and for women even earlier, and that's because more women tend to kind of stop working for a while, or stop working altogether. They're more likely to go home and raise families. But anyway, salaries tend to stagnate around age 40. So basically, the higher you can start off, the higher you're going to keep going. And so it has a huge impact on your future earnings. We've done calculations that say around things like negotiating a $3,000 increase in your starting salary can lead to $500,000 to $1 million total future earnings across your career. So day one, game face, you want to start thinking about this. So $634,000 for a $5,000 a year thing. See, I know my math. The problem is that millennials especially are not negotiating. In a recent study that we did, only 37% of the millennials that we spoke to asked for a raise, said that they had ever asked for a raise. The thing is, 69% of millennials who did ask for a raise got a raise. And 43% got the actual amount, the entire amount that they asked for. So what this is saying is that even though talking about salary is kind of scary and intimidating, it's important, and if you ask, you're likely to get something, so it's always worth it to ask. Negotiation is about two things. It's about what you are worth, and it's about what they, being the employer, are willing to pay you. And so I work for PayScale.com. We're the world's largest online salary database, and we can help you figure out what both of those things are and how to find a number that meets in the middle. So PayScale, who here has been to PayScale.com? Ever? Okay, cool. Have you guys heard of it at all? Okay. We're one of the kind of homegrown Seattle startups here. We've been around for about 10 years, and basically what we do is we were founded on the idea that salary is a complicated thing to talk about, and because it's hard and everything is kind of hidden and shrouded in secrecy, people aren't earning what they should be. So by kind of opening the door in that and making all of this data publicly available, both for consumers, both for people just coming to research salaries and find out if they're making the right amount, and also for employers, the way that our company makes money is that we make software that we have 3,000 corporate clients. They use that to set their pay strategy. We're making the conversation easier, more honest, and more profitable for everybody. So when you are just starting your job hunt, one of the first things you can do is use the PayScale Research Center to research salaries. So I'll put this deck online so that you'll all be able to see it, but it's payscale.com/research. And what you can do is you can go and you can research over 14,000 job titles, over, I want to say around 8,000 employers, and also skills, degrees, certificates, all these things to see how they influence salary. And you can find out how different jobs are affected by things like experience, skills, location, and employer. So just one kind of quick example that you can see is this is a screenshot from the page for Marketing Manager. So what we have here is we have the median salary nationwide for a marketing manager, and then what you can do is you can go in and you can add in, how much would you make if you're just starting out, and if you're in the city of Seattle, and if you are, an ace at social media, things like that. You can get a more exact number. So as you're trying to figure out what job titles you want to be applying for, this is a really good starting point. I myself was a comparative literature major, and I had plans to go to grad school and do that, and I actually just kind of ended up going into online copywriting the year that I was studying for my LSATs and my GRE. But kind of thinking back, if I hadn't had that plan, if I hadn't graduated just at the time when online publishing was really becoming a thing, and everybody was trying to make a website, but nobody knew how to write for the internet, which was basically kind of a thing that we made up at the time, and created all the rules. I wouldn't have known where to start. I didn't know how much. I was basically a comparative literature major, is basically an English major. So it was like, well, you can be a teacher or you can go work for a magazine, like in the movies. I had no idea what to apply for, how much things made, or even kind of any kind of starting point. So the fact that this exists now, and this is something, if you're considering just even different job titles, it's a huge boon. The next thing is, once you kind of are going to apply for a job, even before you send in your application, you want to determine how much you should earn in that role. So you want to take PayScale's what if survey. So basically go to payscale.com. Kind of the bread and butter of our site is our salary survey, and this is a survey that we've had more than 40 million people come and take. And if you're employed, you can take a regular salary survey, and we'll tell you what percentile you're making in the market compared to people just like you. So people the same amount of experience, education, who live in the same area, things like that, and work for a similar type of employer. The what if survey is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's you basically say, what if I, with my qualifications and educations and skills and experience, was to have this job for this kind of employer, and you can name the employer by name and everything. And we're going to give you a range of, what the median salary is for that, and then, you can kind of wiggle in from there. So that way, when you walk into your very first interview, you already know in your mind how much you're going to be asking for, what the acceptable number is for you. Now, don't tell that number right away. You really start the negotiation process as soon as you apply. So a lot of times, even in a job application, they're going to ask you what your current salary is or what your preferred salary range is. This is something that I have learned from actual recruiters that I didn't know when I first started out at all. And I didn't actually know this before I started at PayScale. Never give a number or preferred salary range on an application. If you can avoid it at all, if it's a recruiter talking to you, if it's a paper that you're filling out, or if it's an online form, just say, I prefer not to talk about this at that time. Worst case scenarios, a lot of the bigger companies, we're going to just have you apply into an online system. And if you have to give a number, just try to give a really, really broad range. This is basically, you want them to come to you with a number first in every situation. So never, never, never just give that away right away. And do not be scared. Employers expect you to negotiate. So as you're going through the interview process, as soon as you think you're going to get a job offer, and as soon as you do, you should be excited, but you should also start thinking about how you're going to negotiate. Data is what's going to set you free in this, so don't be scared. So you get a job offer, and they're going to talk to you about your paycheck, and that's kind of the first number that sticks in your head. But you also want to think about the entire compensation package, and that includes things like salary, things like bonuses, including signing bonuses, equity, especially in a city like Seattle. If you're going into tech, or if you're going to work for any kind of smaller company, you want to start talking about ownership and things like that. PTO, or paid time off, flex time, benefits, and education opportunities. These are all things that you want to negotiate into your package, especially from day one. So things that, things like signing bonuses are super common. this is something that you can absolutely just ask for. And a signing bonus is going to be a one-time thing versus an annual bonus, which is something, an amount of money. It's usually tied to metrics in your job that you can get every year. And these are conversations that you want to have with the recruiter and the hiring manager as soon as the offer comes in. If they can't budge on salary, if you start kind of learning about that, ask for more time off, because that's something that employers can generally be more flexible about. It doesn't cost anything out of their pockets. And especially if you're working in a more competitive industry, again, like tech, vacation time is something they can be pretty flexible about. I know that our company just went to unlimited PTO, which is basically an honor system saying everyone is an adult, use your brain, but also this is something that we can offer you. And it's great for us. But this is something that you want to talk about. If the standard is 3 weeks at that company, but most people get 4 weeks in that industry, which you can find out on PayScale's Research Center, ask for that. Benefits, different upgrades to health insurance or company car or depending on your situation, just use the Research Center again to find out what other people are getting and just find out what is standard. And then education opportunities, especially for this audience, for people coming just out of school. Education opportunities is huge. I'm sure you know that there are some employers who will pay you to go get a master's degree or an MBA or something like that. That's great. That's not your only option though when it comes to educational opportunities. If you're applying when you're doing your research and you find out like, okay, I'm worth this much in this job, but if I had this certificate or if I had this skill set that I was really great at, that is something that could lead me to a $10,000 or $20,000 a year pay increase. If you're already maxed out for your current skill set, from day one, you want to go in and say, I really want to get this certificate. I really come to concrete, come with specific examples, and say, this is something that I would like to do. A lot of times they can find budget because it's deductible to go through and get things like that improved. It also shows that you're a go-getter. It shows that you're a good candidate. There's a good reason that they're giving you this job offer. And if you work in an industry where it's not really certificate-based or your job doesn't depend on something like that, find out what the good conferences are, what good just training, general skill sets are, leadership, management skills. These are all things, again, every employer wants someone who takes the initiative and is going to be wanting to do all this, so it's a win-win situation. Do not take the first offer. So for me, the first time that I ever negotiated a job offer was actually when I took the job at PayScale. I'd never negotiated before. I wasn't trying to be a go-getter because or be extremely aggressive with a company that was all about salary negotiation in the first place, because I figured they probably knew everything. But I was given a counteroffer by my current employer and kind of went back and forth on that. I was so scared. I was not only scared, I felt like it was something where I was imposing and I was kind of being like a mean person. I've now learned that this is very common with women, especially. But it was absolutely fine. Everything was okay. My hiring manager was super cool about it. They even allowed me to negotiate my salary up because my other employer had, had better 401k matching than PayScale did at the time. So it was an exhausting process, but it's not something that you have to be worried about. And honestly, I've spoken now with industry experts, with recruiters, and with a ton of hiring managers since I came to PayScale. You're expected to negotiate. There's always wiggle room in the budget when they first come to you. And if the number that they offer doesn't meet the compensation package that you've researched, just come back with a very specific number. You don't want to come back and just be like, oh no, I need more money than that. Come back with that number, circle back to your research, and give that number that you've presented. Do not be emotional. That just made me happy. So like I said, we just published a salary negotiation guide, and one of the really great articles in there was by Jim Hopkinsons, who is the author of The Salary Tutor. You can go to salarytutor.com. He puts out a lot of really great content about negotiation. But he has this great formula that he shares, and that's you basically, and sometimes it just helps to write it down. So you want to, when you're asking for this very specific number, you just say, not only do I have X, but I also possess this specific trait or skill that sets me apart from everybody else. And for that reason, I'd like to be paid this amount of money. Writing things down is super important. You want to practice. Salary negotiation is definitely a time when you want to grab your friend, sit in the back of Starbucks, and run through this 100 times. You're going to feel a little crazy, but then when the actual moment comes where you're talking to the recruiter or the hiring manager, it's going to feel 100 times easier. It's not going to be easy, but it'll feel a lot easier than if you didn't practice. And then finally, if you're kind of in a salary negotiation and you've been talking to the recruiter, the hiring manager, and they're not really budging, but they're still keeping it open, the last thing that you want to remember is that you have a trump card, and that's time. Has anyone here ever had to hire anybody or like been the hiring manager for a position? Okay, it's kind of terrible, right? Did you have that experience? Oh, okay, yeah. It's a little different. When you are hiring for a job, you have one group breathing down your neck because whenever you have an open headcount, that means that you already have all that work that you're doing, basically. So you want to get that job filled. You want to get it done before, in order to make this year's budget, before the next set of budget runs out. You have all these time constraints that are going to be working against you. So if they've made you a job offer, they're not going to just walk away willy-nilly. So it's always perfectly acceptable to very politely say to somebody, if you can just meet this offer, you put out the number, by like 5 o'clock today, I will absolutely take the job. So you're proactively accepting an offer that you're putting out there. That way they know that that's when they can go to whoever is signing the budget and being like, hey, I just need this much more, and then everything is set. That's a much different situation for a recruiter or a hiring manager than just going back and be like, they keep going back and forth and it's a little bit So that's kind of your last minute. You have more time to get hired than the people do who are trying to fill that job. So there. And then basically, if you like these tips, and I'll answer a bunch of questions after this, PayScale salary negotiation guide just got published. It's payscale.com/salary negotiation guide. We have 18 articles in there, actually more. I think we have 20 articles in there about every part of the salary negotiation process. Specific advice for millennials, for women, for different industries, different points in your career. So I highly recommend that you check that out. Also, this little guy makes me really happy. I think he's very encouraging. So thank you. I know that was kind of quick, but I did want to sit here and take as many questions as we have time for. So, any questions? Yes?
So are annual bonuses and signing bonuses like a real thing that we should be expecting as freshly out of college?
It depends on your industry and on your job type, but signing bonuses tend to vary a little bit more. If you're in something that's at all competitive, yes. If somebody is recruiting you, yes, it's at least something that you should ask for. It doesn't mean that you're going to get $100,000 for taking a job that pays $50,000, but it is something that you might get. Annual bonuses are pretty common. Again, use our research center because we'll break down what percentage of people get what as an annual bonus. But that is always something that you can throw out there. And the way that you want to do it, though, is you want to tie it to metrics. You want to be, what's your major? What kind of jobs are you kind of thinking about going into?
Linguistics, and I'm currently working as a junior paralegal.
So you're working as a junior paralegal. So what are you? And you're studying linguistics. So what kind of jobs are you going to be applying for after you graduate?
I might stay. I might go to.
So say that you were applying for, if you're not going to law school, I'm trying to think. So you're applying for another paralegal job, but now you're coming out and you have your BA and you're all set, and a bigger firm wants to hire you. And so you've gone through this process. You can absolutely ask for a signing bonus, and you can absolutely, but the way to kind of approach it again is to be like, hey, if I can, get this many hours billed, if I can, tie it to something that's really common and that's approachable, and then that's something that you can absolutely ask for. Yes?
What's the difference between PayScale and Glassdoor?
PayScale and Glassdoor. PayScale is quantitative data and Glassdoor is qualitative data. So what that means is a Glassdoor is a site where you can go and they will tell you what one anonymous person makes in a role at a company, and they will tell you what it feels like to work there and what the culture is like. PayScale has had 40 million people take our survey. We give you data based on big, like a lot of people have said. We have an entire data team that sanitizes the data, and we make sure that we are confident enough in it to then go take that data and sell it to companies as our main revenue source.
And is it company or firm specific?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Just to clarify, you only negotiate a salary once you have an offer, never in an interview process?
Yeah, I mean, if you can start it basically whenever. I mean, usually you aren't going to negotiate until they've given you an offer, because otherwise that really hasn't come up. You don't want to be the first person to give a number. So a lot of times what happens is you have just an informational interview and they'll call you. Usually it'll be the recruiter. And they're just going to ask you to make sure that you're broadly a right fit and that it's worth it for the hiring manager to talk to you. And a really common question is be like, oh, okay, well, and what's your current salary? Or how much are you looking to make? And the reason that they ask that is because they're just screening people at that point. They're just trying to, toss people out because there's a bunch of applications for this job. Just say like, oh, you know what, I'd rather not talk about that right now. Or like, let's bring that up later on in the conversation. Just brush it off. They know what you're doing. You don't want to get put into one pile or another that early on. You want to dazzle them with your brilliance first, and then they'll be able to, and then they're also going to be more likely to meet you where you want to be. Yes?
So what has happened to me in the past is I've just been asked, what would you like to be paid, or what were you thinking in regards to pay? So how do you respond to that if you're not supposed to give a number?
I would, again, just say, I'm doing some research about what fair market values are, but let's talk about that later on in the process. I know it feels a little bit kind of shysty. It feels a little bit like, really? Like, am I just brushing them off like that? It's perfectly okay. It's what they're absolutely used to. And it's a typical negotiation strategy, so you won't be the first or the last person to do that. Any other questions? Yes.
What are some of the challenges that women specifically face in negotiating salaries?
So there are several of them. First of all, women are less likely to ask for raises in general. There have been a ton of studies on this, but in general, women are just, we're kind of taught to make people happy, and we tend to operate from the attitude that if I just work really hard, this will shine through and I will be rewarded for my efforts. Men, on the other hand, are, told like, hey, you go, ask for what you want. And it's perfectly fine. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it. What it means is that women should also do the same thing. They've also done a lot of studies where men and women will look at the same job listing and they'll be equally qualified. Men will apply if they have 75% of the required skills. Women have to have 110% of the requirements in order to apply for the same job. So there's first that coaching. One statistic in the study that we just did was that when we asked everybody whether or not they'd ever negotiated for a job, women were just below men. I think it was 45% of men had asked for a raise and 43% of women had asked for a raise. And when we first looked at those numbers, we were like, that's weird. I always see the difference being so much bigger. And then I was talking to some of our statisticians and our data scientists, and we have psychologists in our company who go through this survey data and survey design. and they were like, well, this is a self-selecting group because we only ask people who came to take the survey. So these are people who are already kind of like thinking about salary and kind of in that mindset. So I think that explains the difference. However, then when we asked people why the people who had not asked for a salary, when we asked them why, the men were much more likely to say that they had never asked for a raise because they'd just always been happy with their salary. Women were much more likely to say that they were uncomfortable talking about salary or that they didn't want to be perceived as pushy. So this is one thing that we also struggle with a lot, is that we are perceived as pushy. There have been several studies in the past year that have come out, and they just say, they'll have men and women both ask for raises or ask for something in a negotiation. And even if they're given them equally afterward, when they interview the interviewee or the hiring person, they are more likely to say that the woman was pushy, even though they were asking for the same thing. So for women, it's hard. It's something that we just have to deal with. Be pushy, because you'll make $554,000 more in your lifetime, and that's worth it. And then for men, good job. But then also, as you go on in your career, and you're like, this is a great thing to be aware of, and you want to be an ally for women, and you want to, if we ever catch yourself, and women, we can be our own worst enemies in the workplace too sometimes. If you're ever in a position where someone's asking you for a salary increase, it's not coming out of your pocket. They're just trying to do what they're trying to do. So kind of check yourself, kind of thing. Do you have a question? You? Yes.
I'm just trying to get a good picture of like what negotiating salary looks like practically. Like, are they often meetings? Like, we're going to call you in and negotiate your salary.
So you're talking about like once you already have the job?
Yeah. Like,
okay.
We're hiring you. Is it like emails back and forth? Like, I want this, or is it usually like?
Yeah. So our salary negotiation guide has a lot of data about this. I kind of skewed this to talk more about during the hiring process, because that's what this is about. But so once you have a job, again, you want to be proactive about doing this. So first of all, you want to be aware of what your company's timeline is. So every company, unless you work for a really small disorganized company, they're going to have kind of an annual review system. And so usually the most common thing is that you'll have an annual review and your pay increase will be tied to that. One thing that you can do even during this interview process is that if you work for a company, and I'm thinking of a very prominent employer in the tech space in Seattle who's known for paying people very well when they hire them, but not giving a lot of raises, is that you should absolutely negotiate like, hey, you know what, I also would like a performance review after 6 months instead of 12 months, because that will just escalate you to be able to get those like comp increases. So what you want to do is you want to be aware of when comp increases typically get dealt out. Throughout the year, anytime you get an accolade, whether it's an email or anything, create an inbox in your email and save those, keep those, because then when it does come time for your review, in addition to you being able to be like, hey, I've increased revenue this much, I've brought this many visitors to the site through my efforts, or I've made this process go this much faster, you also have a bunch of emails that you can be like, and everybody knows how awesome I am. It's definitely something that I've done, and it's been super useful. It's kind of funny because our CEO is pretty well known for sending out like emails that basically consist of like cool guys. So I have to translate them a little bit, but everyone knows at our company. But yeah, you just want to do those things. And then when you know that your review is coming up, give your boss, if it's your direct manager who's in charge of comp, which is usually how it works, give them a heads up. So when the invite goes out for the calendar, send them a note and be like, hey, just so you know, I'd really like to start talking about like how much of an increase I can expect this year, or forward them a bunch of those congratulatory emails that you've gotten from your CEO or from other higher ups, and be like, hey, I think I've done a really great job this year, and I've been doing some salary research. I really would like to talk about compensation at this. And then you can have that conversation in person if at all possible. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I've been thinking about things that you can tie into a signing offer. One of the bigger ones being like relocating, or like trying to be like as close to wherever you are working as possible.
Yes.
What are other things you can also tie to a signing offer besides relocation, and then probably competition if you have another offer?
Yeah, relocation is really huge. So cost of living, we have a cost of living calculator on our site that's super useful too. Yeah, obviously a counter offer is really great. I wouldn't really tie I wouldn't tie student loans into it, just because like almost everyone has student loans. What I would do is, use the data. Like, that's why places like PayScale are super useful. I mean, if you get better data from Glassdoor, go to Glassdoor too. If you get a bigger number, because you're going to get an individual example, not like a general trend. But if you go and you have those numbers and you come to them and you're like, again, go back to kind of that formula, and you're like, I really appreciate that offer, but because I can do this, and because I have these skills and I have this certification, the market value for the job is X, and I think that I would really deserve that. I would stick to that. Does that make sense? Yes.
I've been working for a startup that's about 5 years old now, and I'm just wondering if I should adjust expectations for salary because they're a startup.
It depends on how well they're doing, and that's a hard question, because if they're doing, obviously if you're working for Uber, yes. You know what I mean? If it's a little mom and pop shop, yes, you should adjust expectations. So one thing when you're doing your salary research, you want to be comparing it. If you're a product manager at a startup with 5 people that isn't making a profit yet, that's different than what a product manager at Microsoft or Amazon would be making. However, if you believe in the company and you think that they're growing, again, this is when you want to talk about different types of compensation. So this is when you can talk about equity or stock or anything like that, or more PTO or more educational opportunities, so that you're just kind of covering your bases at that point. Yes?
Just something in my experience, I've missed out on a lot of opportunities to negotiate within the hiring, and then once I've had a job, like I actually have a position where they pretty much begged me to come back, and I just completely didn't even think. I was like, because I love the company, I love working with the people, like, yeah, sure, let's do this. And it went over my head, and like a week later I was like, that was the perfect opportunity to have something. And is there, I don't know, do you have any advice for not doing that, or like being practically weird?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say whenever you're thinking about any kind of step in your career, it's good to schedule, just like you do quarterly check-ins with your boss, probably at least, do quarterly check-ins with yourself. And so, just be like, okay, this is where I was 3 months ago. This is where I am now. These are my goals. Is my compensation matching this? Like, when is the last time my compensation was adjusted? When was the last time I talked to anybody about getting a raise? How many kudos have I been getting lately? Things like that. And if you kind of are just stay aware of it and put it on your calendar as something to do, that's always a good time to kind of remind yourself, be like, hey, you know what? They haven't given me a raise or talked about compensation in 18 months. So that seems a little bit long. I should start to bring up that conversation now. Because you may work for a company that has like a messy, unorganized HR system. It also depends on your hiring manager, on your direct manager. Some direct managers are going to fight for you. Some direct managers are not going to fight for you. That doesn't mean that they're bad people. Just, it's not top of their mind. So it's up to you then to be proactive and to bring that up. Whenever you are making a big change in your career, whether it's leaving, rejoining, joining, getting a promotion, having somebody talk to you about a new job, role, or promotion, anything like that, you absolutely want to evaluate your salary. And so that's a time when you want to, again, bring up that conversation, because that's when people can adjust budgets. Yes?
I liked your phrase, "Dad looks like you're free."
Yes.
So I'm wondering, kind of like practically, when you have your title, put that in, and you showed us an example of the marketing manager and what type of data will pop up from PayScale. how do you go about, I guess, placing yourself, right, on that grade?
Yeah, so what you want to do then, so the Research Center is a great place to kind of get that first start. Then you want to go in and you want to take one of our surveys. Our surveys take about 15 to 20 minutes. They're very, very detailed decision trees. So you're going to go in, you're going to talk about, so if it's a job that you already have and you're just trying to find out where you fall, you'll take our regular salary survey, so salary for my current job. And if you tell us that you are a pilot, we're going to ask you what kind of plane you fly. If you tell us that you're a nurse, we're going to ask you how many beds there are in the hospital. Because we've identified kind of the bread and butter of PayScale is that we have identified what we call compensable factors, and those are things that actually affect pay, and it varies from job to job. So by doing that, you're going to get you're going to get a detailed report. So you'll have a salary report. So that example that I showed you, that was a chart just for like what marketing managers make. When you take that report, you'll get that same chart, but it'll be like, this is where you fall for someone like you with your experience and your education and your skill set, and based on where you live and what kind of employer you have, that's going to tell you where you fall. Should turn off your phone. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so that's where you want to go to absolutely like benchmark yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that would be a specific one for yourself, right?
Yes.
You're putting in your own information.
Yes.
But then, I guess if
Turn this off.
if it's kind of a bidding situation, right? Should you, kind of like a rule of thumb, maybe start with like your first offer is $5,000 more, and then.
Okay, I see. So if you're kind of like talking to two employers and they're both kind of offering you, and you have two people who are definitely interested in you, kind of thing. Yeah. So the way that we talk about pay is, we talk about the one number because that's something that people kind of latch onto, but it's a percentile system. So kind of that typical median pay is that 50th percentile or 55th percentile. If you know that if you have two companies bidding over you, you're probably going to be above that 55th percentile. So that's when you can start looking at going, like 10 to 20% above that.
And then even just on if you just have one company, one offer, do you always want to start, I guess, would you want to determine for yourself kind of the salary?
So what I would do, so again, this is why you don't want to throw out the number first. So you have a number in your head, right? Say it was $75,000. So if they come to you and they offer you $70,000, that's when you come back, you're like, well, actually, I've done my research and it shows that I should be making this much. So I'd love to work for you for $75,000 a year. That's easy. If your number is $75,000 and they come to you with $76,000, then it doesn't mean you're like, okay. That's when you'll start like nudging it up, definitely. And so that's when you just kind of want to. I think it's always good to look back and look into like, oh, is this have things changed really suddenly? Am I in a super competitive market? But kind of go with your gut at that point, because you already know that you're making a salary that you want to do. So if you were at the 60th percentile, like nudge yourself up to the 65th percentile and see how that changes things. Yes?
So I think myself and maybe a lot of people here are interested in working for like nonprofits.
Yes.
Can you talk about some specific challenges? Because I'm just thinking of how when you work for a company that's their goal is not to make profit.
Right.
When you're bringing something unique to the organization, like how does that work in terms of compensation? Because there's the stereotype that like, oh, well, you're not going to make any money if you work for a nonprofit,
right.
and that shouldn't be your goal, which is also true. But it's like you still need to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think the first half of what you said is correct. Like if you work for a nonprofit, which is fantastic, you are going to not make as much as if you worked for a for-profit company, and that's fine. That's just something that you accept. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't care about making money, because you do need to pay your bills. Also, you need to know in your head what that minimum number is for you to be happy, because if you just completely burn yourself out, and this is something that nonprofit employers face a lot, if you just burn yourself out and you're making a wage that doesn't meet your basic needs, you're not going to be happy. The company is you're going to end up quitting. The company is going to lose you, and it actually costs them more money. So when I talk to nonprofit employers, that's the thing that comes up is employee retention is a big concern for any employer, especially if you work in HR and you do those budgets, because every time you have to hire a new person, it costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of time. You have to train them. You have to hope that they're a good fit. You have to get their whole setup going. So they don't want to do that over and over again. So when you're talking to nonprofits, I think a really good angle to take is to be like, hey, if you're already in the job, or if you're just interviewing for it, and you started the negotiation process on an offer, is to be like, you know what, because I have these skills and I have this, and especially with nonprofit, if you're working in a nonprofit, you probably are going to have more volunteer experience and more things like that. Come to them with that and be like, this is what I think I deserve in this market working for a nonprofit, and this is what I need in order to be happy. Doesn't mean you're a bad person, just means you value your mental health. I know a lot of people who have burned out on the nonprofit world, so don't become that statistic. Yes? Yes?
If you've applied for a couple jobs and you get one offer but you really want the other one, and you interview but you haven't heard back, what can you do?
That's a hard question. It's always easy when you have two different options coming at you. It's difficult when you have two different timelines playing at each other. I think open communication is going to be your number one asset here, and so it's completely fine if you kind of have. If you've had an interview with the other company, you're really excited about working for that company, but they're just working at a slower pace, talk to the hiring manager, send them an email. I would always talk to the recruiter and the hiring manager if you're emailing, so CC everybody, because especially with recruiters, sometimes they just won't pick up or they'll get behind an email because it's not. Generally, the hiring manager has a little bit more invested because they're the person who is probably doing the extra work or really like moving to fill this role. And so just tell them that, like, hey, I'm still really interested in working for you. I've been talking to this other company. I did just get an offer for this much, but you guys are definitely still on my top of my wish list. I'd love to talk to you, but my timeline is getting shorter. So again, I know we talked about how timing is your trump card. That's when you want to play that as well.
And you would tell them what the other offer was?
I would say at least broadly. I don't think you have to go down to exact number, but you can say like, I just got a really great offer from my company, and then just let the conversation evolve from there. Yes?
Do you have anything on my position is a part-time student position right now, but I do have a verbal offer to stay after I graduate. So obviously there needs to be renegotiation.
Yes.
Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I would just treat it like you were having a performance review and getting a promotion. So if you are graduating in June, in 52 days, 152. Oh, okay. I was trying to fast forward you a little bit. So I would say about 6 weeks out, I would start having that conversation. Just be like, hey, I just wanted to talk to you. I know that we've talked about me coming on full time. I am so excited to join this company full time, but let's talk about compensation. And, this is the salary. I think that, again, you don't want to be like, this is what I want to make, but you want to be like, what would the pay be for full time? Let them throw out a number and then you can come back with what you've researched. Yes.
So you've been hired for a paid summer internship, and they didn't really specify how much it was an hour. Are the rules for internships the same as for like a normal job? Obviously it wouldn't be a salary, it would be an hourly wage. So, because I feel like they'd be like $12 an hour. Is there any room to?
Yeah, well, internships are like a whole other thing. Yeah, if it's because there's unpaid internships and there's paid internships, and then there's those really depressing lists of how much interns in the Silicon Valley get paid to work at Google and stuff, and you're like, oh, you really should have been an engineer. But yeah, so we don't have as much data on that, but it's something that you can at least start to. We do actually have more than you would think for interns, which tells us that a lot of people want to go and do that. So as far as what you're talking about, if it's an hour, whether it's an hourly or a general thing, I think it's definitely worth it to negotiate. I wouldn't ever look at an internship as a way that you're going to make a ton of money.
Right.
But
Just as a temporary in between.
Right, yeah. But what I would absolutely negotiate is those extra educational opportunities. That is something when you're like, if you know that you're getting paid at market rate and this is about what other people are making, that's the perfect time to be like, hey, I would love this, here's this training course that I would love to do. Or if you can like pay for this extra coursework that I can do. Again, employers love interns because interns go on to be the most productive employees. They stay with companies the longest. They're the most engaged with them. So really like milk that for sure. Yes.
Would it be appropriate to tell a potential employer after they've given you an offer that you need to take time to think about it, or do you automatically have to come back with a reply?
No, absolutely. That's a great question. I should have put that in there. That's the other thing. So timing is your trump card. They'll also try to play it. So it's really typical to get the call to be like, hey, we're really excited. We gave you this offer. You have 24 hours to accept it. At that point, it's perfectly acceptable to be like, oh, I am so excited about this offer. You know what? I'm going to need the weekend, though, to think about it. So let me get back to you on Monday. And you may have to negotiate the day. They may be in a super rush. If they're in that much of a rush, that's a good thing for you. So absolutely. I mean, when we talk about writing down like a script, that's almost something that you want to do right away, actually, because you want to think. Yes.
So say you get an offer way before you graduate.
Yes.
But you haven't really applied to other companies that you would rather work at. Are you able to kind of give can you wait a couple months sort of response, or?
I mean, there may be a special case, but I would probably say no. But you can be aggressive about salary negotiation, because if they want you that bad, again, you're not going to be at that very like that 50th percentile. You should be at least on the high end of the earning spectrum. Anybody else? Yes?
Can we talk about hiring cycles a little bit? Just because we're graduating, most of us.
Yes,
June 13th,
absolutely.
And it's like, okay, well, what is that timeline for? Do they? A lot of them like base it around, oh, college students are graduating, we're going to hire these positions, or is it basically just random? Is it like a month out, 2 months out? I mean, what's the average kind of? Because I'm really struggling with when do I?
Where do you start? Absolutely. No, that's a great question. The answer is it totally depends. And it depends on what you're going into. As a general rule, if you're looking to work with a really large company that always has a ton of openings, so something like your Boeing or your Amazon or something, they're going to have a big push for jobs that are great for college graduates around the time that you graduate. For smaller companies, they're going to open up jobs when they have openings. What I would say, but you want to think about the hiring process can take anywhere from like we've hired people in 2 weeks, but it's not insane to take 3 months to hire somebody. It's not insane to take 6 months to fill a position, honestly. So what I would do is, you always want to be prepared. The worst thing, if you start too early, the worst thing that's going to happen to you is you apply for the position, they talk to you, and you realize that and you tell them like, oh, one thing though is I don't graduate until June, so I won't be available until the 20th of June. If they need to fill that position sooner, the worst thing they're going to be is like, oh, well, you're still a good person, we're interested in you, they're going to keep your resume on hand, and then they're going to hire somebody else. But then when you're only 2 months out from graduating, call that person again, absolutely, because you don't know if another job is opening, especially if you're just talking to a recruiter at that point, because there's a lot of recruiters who work for many companies, and so they may know of a job opening of a similar role at another company that'll be perfect for you. So it's never too early. Do not wait until like the day after you graduate. That's terrible. I mean, there's been a lot of great novels written about the depression that ensues from that. But yeah, you absolutely want to be proactive. Start talking to companies right away. And I mean, really, do you guys all know what an informational is? Okay, so an informational is like, it's like a pre-interview. You usually go and you'll talk to a hiring manager and have coffee and learn about what a role is. Start doing informationals like at least 3-4 months out, because just be prepared. As you're thinking about your job process, stash away spending $25 a week buying people coffee. It's the best investment you can make. Even if it's at a company where there's no open positions and you're 4 months out for graduating, find people who have jobs similar to what you want, or who are the hiring managers for the jobs that you want. Contact them on LinkedIn, send them an email, buy them coffee, learn about it. If you're a good candidate, you're going to get on their good side, and as soon as they know that something's going to open up, you're much more likely to be contacted. Anything else? Yes.
So the information on PayScale.com, it can be categorized by like companies.
Yes.
And on that note, because I'm trying to think, like, I'm particularly interested in doing work in like Japan, China, Korea, and I know sometimes they'll have companies that are based or are working out of
Yes.
like Seattle or wherever.
Yeah.
How well does PayScale cater to that kind of?
So we only publish data that we're confident in. So it has to meet our data team's like seal of approval that like we think that this is okay. We don't have as much international data. We have a lot of data around Canada, the United Kingdom, and India. There are a lot of Asian countries that we have a lot of data for, but what kind of work specifically are you kind of looking to go into there?
I'm an interior design major, so I'd like to do some interior design around commercial design.
Yeah, I would definitely start looking there. If not, you'll have to like kind of piece the data together by figuring out what people make here, compare it to the cost of living. And then obviously, if you're going to be working in Tokyo, you're going to be earning a lot more than if you live in like Hanoi. But yeah, that'll at least get you started for sure. Okay. Anything else? Do you guys feel like super excited about your job searches now? Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I really enjoyed this. Thank you. I ran out of cards on Friday and they didn't come in today. But you can email me if you have any questions. You can connect with me on Twitter. PayScale is hiring, so we have a bunch of jobs that you guys should look at and apply for too. So definitely, and if you see something that you're interested in, send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I would be happy to introduce you to the right people. It's a really good company to work for.
Thank you, Aubrey. She's great, wasn't she? She
Thank
answered every
you.
question.